This is a mini lecture on one of the articles that you've been assigned to read for this week. This article is Indigenous Agriculture and Sustainable Food, and it was written by Katie Pace. The objectives are summary, important aspects of the article, and things for you to consider. So we've gone over this in a previous week, and I begin by summarizing the article. And summarizing is a very common writing assignment in most university courses. And it is just referring to summarizing a specific piece of material. And in all likelihood, you have already come across this type of assignment. Even if you're unfamiliar with it, though, it is something that you do in everyday life. We are constantly summarizing our days, movies, songs we like, situations that have happened. For a university summary, there are three main requirements. It must cover for our purposes, the whole article. The material should be presented in a neutral fashion, and the summary should be a condensed version of the material that is presented in your own words. So it does not require any verbatim, that is word for word quotations or citations. It is merely a summary of the article written, in this case, in my own words, and with the appearance of being objective. You don't know what I think of the article just from the summary. So the summary of the article, and I'm just going to quickly read off of the slide. Writing for the Sustainable Food Center, SFC, Katie Pace's article, Indigenous Agriculture and Sustainable Food, and then I provide you with the date, considers agriculture prior to Europe and Britain's colonization of, in her consideration, North and South America. She suggests the indigenous interaction with landscape, irrigation, and the production of food was an holistic approach. As an example, she refers to the Three Sisters. The Three Sisters concerns growing squash, beans, and corn, with each plant benefiting the other as well as acting as a natural pesticide and nurturing the soil. She goes on to discuss the farming techniques prior to the arrival of colonialism, where indigenous farmers combined small space farming with high yields of multi-dependent produce that benefits the soil and assists in irrigation. When this proved insufficient, indigenous farmers relied upon various hydraulic systems to ensure a productive crop, such as terraces in mountainous regions, sunken gardens in plateaus, and raised platforms to protect the crops from flash floods. Pace asserts that overall, these were sustainable practices that withstood various upheavals for thousands of years until disrupted and stopped by colonization. Pace goes on to indicate that indigenous peoples across numerous continents and countries are insisting upon self-determination and a desire to participate in their own food systems, from the practice of farming to relying upon locally sourced food for their sustenance. Pace closes the article with an acknowledgement toward companion planting, composting, sustainable gardening practices, and the debt owed toward indigenous farmers for their farming practices and wisdom concerning the land. So you'll notice that first sentence sorry, I'm just getting my highlighter, is telling you where the article comes from, who wrote it, the title of the article, and when it was published, as well as what it's doing, like its overall topic. And then I merely break down the article and what she's talking about, without inserting my own opinion. Important aspects of the article. Most of these are direct quotes, and you can see that from like here you'll see my citation. I'm saying that Pace wrote this, the year she published it, and NPAG just means no pagination because it's online. There is no page number. And I'm just telling you how she opens her article. With increasingly, food growers around the world are recognizing that modern agricultural systems are unsustainable. And then she goes on to write, in the search for alternative, sustainable food growing practices, gardeners are turning to traditional farming methods used prior to the advent of plows, artificial chemicals, and mechanized irrigation systems. So basically what she's talking about here is that our current systems, not only in agriculture, but our many of our current systems are not sustainable, and we are doing, I'm sure this is no surprise, long-term damage to our planet. And that we are, for example, in agriculture, they are looking for more sustainable practices to farming. And she goes on to talk about the indigenous connection with the culture and the land, and how indigenous cultures, how they practiced agriculture for thousands of years, that was a sustainable practice, that it did not do long-term damage to the landscape and to the planet. And so these are just two quotes indicating that, and also indicating how these agricultural practices were in effect, from like the Three Sisters to the irrigation systems and so on. Then toward the close of the article, she talks about Indigenous peoples and their desire for food security. And she talks about a movement within indigenous cultures to create their own food practices in effect. So the right to healthy food, to achieve control over their own food and their own farming practices at an individual, family, and community level. That they want self-determination in their own food practices, and that most Indigenous communities are not interested in unsustainable farming practices. So she's talking about a kind of movement that is going on in environments of Indigenous environments. And even outside of Indigenous environments, many people are talking about the need to eat locally, um, to protect the environment. So for you to consider, why are Indigenous peoples across the planet, from the Sami to the Maori, interested in producing their own food in their own way on their own land? And why does Pace, the writer, provide a history lesson on the farming techniques relied upon throughout the Americas prior to colonization? So normally I don't answer these questions. However, given our current remote teaching, I think it's awkward to kind of just leave them hanging without you being able to interact with me in a face-to-face environment. So I provide an answer. Indigenous agricultural practices largely depend on traditional knowledge common in agricultural systems to preserve ecosystems, biodiversity, and useful in maintaining, sustaining food and human health. So I am providing the answer. I don't know if that will continue, or if I'll continue kind of in a question format, but we'll see. So that is the end of this little lecture on Katie Pace's article. And it's one of two that you need to read for this week, along with, I believe it's some grammar and a few other things that I've posted on Moodle. And I hope the beginning of your week is going well. Thank you very much. Bye.